it's Hailey. Happy Bookmas Day 29. Today I'm going to be talking about my most anticipated books that are releasing in 2023. Have a ton of books for today's list. Now, tomorrow's video is going to be my 5-star predictions for the year, but in the past I've done some like new releases that are coming out in that video, but I decided to just focus on books that I already own and am really wanting to read, because I didn't really know like where to draw the line essentially between an anticipated one that I think is going to be 5 stars. It just seemed kind of silly, so I just decided to do it all in today's video, and then tomorrow I'll be discussing the books that they came out whenever, but I think that I'll give them 5 stars when I read them, and I will be encouraged to read them in 2023. So I have a massive list of books to talk about today. There are so many. So before we get into today's video, don't forget to click that subscribe button and then click the bell icon so you will be notified whenever I post. I was posting a new video every single day for the entire month of December, but I still am going to be posting multiple times a week as regularly throughout the year, so you can still look forward to a lot of new content. But without further ado, let's get into this massive list of books. It is kind of like top heavy, and by that I mean there aren't as many books that are announced for like later in the year. Those will come later, so maybe midway through the year I'll do another like most anticipated releases. I've done it kind of quarterly. I don't know if that would be preferred. Please do let me know. So the first book that doesn't have a release date, or at least not one that I could find, is Stateless by Elizabeth Wein. This is the author of many books. She writes historical fictions that are focusing on pilots, and I have really enjoyed her books that I have read in the past. Now this one is kind of a little bit different because her other books I feel like have been set mostly during World War II, but this book is actually set in between. So it's set in between World War I and World War II, and there's kind of this race to try and unify Europe again. So you're following a British girl who has been chosen to represent Britain in this European pilot race, but she's also the only woman who has been chosen for this, and it seems kind of silly when you have like the Nazis are starting to rise and also there's a civil war in Spain, so something like this seems kind of silly to try and unify and bring peace to Europe, but nonetheless, it is something that is happening. So I just enjoy her historical fiction, so this is definitely one that I am keeping an eye out for. This next one kind of confuses me because it might be out already. I kind of was having a hard time telling. I haven't seen it at all, but it was on like most anticipated lists, or at least like YA books that are coming out in 2023 lists, and yeah, so we're just gonna go on the assumption that it is coming out next year, but that is Princess of Souls by Alexandra Christo. So Alexandra Christo wrote the one book, Something Kingdom. Is it To Kill a Kingdom? It was like a mermaidy sort of story, but this is a new book by her, and this one is actually a Rapunzel retelling, but it is following an immortal witch whose fate is tied to this boy, but she essentially has been groomed to steal souls for an immortal king, which seems problematic, obviously. Next is one of 2 books that is coming out by this author duo, but Never Vacation with Your Ex by Emily Wibberley and Austin Sigmund Broca. I'm not sure when this one is releasing, but this is a new YA book by them. I can't remember if the book that I'll talk about later is YA. I don't think it is. I think the other one is an adult romance by them. But this one is described as Forgetting Sarah Marshall meets Crazy Stupid Love, which is definitely a really interesting combination. I also haven't read all that many stories dealing with like exes or people who have broken up, so that definitely is intriguing to me. Next is Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute by Talia Hibbert. I actually already have my copy. It showed up in the mail, which is super exciting, but this is coming out January 3rd, so there's really not all that long for you guys to wait at all. Talia Hibbert wrote the Brown Sisters trilogy, but that was adult romance, and this is actually her first YA book. So here we are following a quirky content creator. It's essentially this survivalist story between her and this clean-cut athlete. They end up teaming up together to test their abilities to survive in the great outdoors, so we'll see how that goes. Knowing Talia Hibbert and how her writing is, I'm expecting it's going to be very enjoyable. Next on January 10th, Lunar Love by Jess and Lauren Kung is coming out, and I'm very excited for this one. This is actually actually a debut author, but it is enemies to lovers featuring Chinese astrology, and the main character is a matchmaker. Like, that just sounds like a match made in heaven. Do you see what I did there? Nailed it. Friday I'm in Love by Cameron Garrett is also coming out on January 10th. I have read one book by this author before, but I believe I have another one on my TBR. I feel like I don't even know what I have on my TBR anymore because I have so many books and I'm so excited about all of them. But Friday I'm in Love, apart from that beautiful cover, it seems like an amazing story. It's essentially about a girl who decides to have a coming out party. Her sweet 16 has kind of passed. Since it's too late for that, she decides to have this lovely coming out party. It is described as a story that is a love letter to rom-coms, black joy, and queer pride, and that sounds incredible. As mentioned earlier, Do I Know You by Emily Wibberley and Austin Sigmund Broca is the latest adult novel by them, and this one is coming out on January 24th. So this is actually about a couple that is already together and they kind of are starting to feel like strangers, and then they essentially kind of end up unintentionally in this like role-playing thing, and this flirtatious game of pretend that they've started might be the thing that they are needing to reignite the spark in their relationship. Next is another debut, and that is Spice Road by Maya Ibrahim. This is coming out January 24th, and it is an Arabian-inspired fantasy. The main character of this book has been raised to protect her nation, but she must fight to find her brother, whose betrayal is now their biggest threat. So definitely a conflict there, but it seems like a really interesting kind of moral conundrum. Reggie and Delilah's Year of Falling by Elise Bryant is coming out on January 31st, and I'm very excited for this one. I read One True Loves by this author this past year and was a huge fan. So this sounds awesome because it's essentially about these two characters and a year of them falling in love. They keep on meeting on like different holidays and stuff, and you get to see their relationship slowly blossom over the course of a year as they're meeting on like Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day, all of the holidays, and I think that seems like a very interesting premise. The Davenports by Crystal Marquis is one that I am so looking forward to. This one is coming out on January 31st, and it is an escapist, swoon-worthy romance and a glimpse into an often overlooked period of African American history. I didn't realize until reading the synopsis that this is actually inspired by a real-life family. So it's set in the 1910s, and I think that the family that it's inspired by is the Pattersons, but I have always been looking for more diversity in historical fiction, and this seems like such a fun, like swoony read. So it's not just going to be kind of a more intense historical fiction, it's going to be a fun one, and I think that is just what I'm needing. Then Everything Happens at Once by M.E. Girard is by the author of Girl Man's Up, which I read a few years ago and I was very pleasantly surprised by. It was a book that I hadn't heard all that much about, but it was very good. So this book is coming out on January 31st, and it is about a teen who is torn between her heart and her hormones, which I feel like describes a lot of teens. But she's navigating feelings that she has for her best friend of a long time and actually a new friend, which complicated situation. Of course, Heartstopper Volume 5 by Alice Oseman is coming out this year, and I am super pumped for it. So this one is coming out on February 2nd, and I cannot wait for the latest book in the Heartstopper series. I'm such a huge fan of the Heartstopper series. It is the sweetest, like most heartwarming graphic novel series, and I know a lot of you agree. So the 5th volume is one that I definitely am going to need to pick up like right away. Chaos Theory by Nick Stone is coming out on February 8th, and this is the latest by the author of Dear Martin. She actually has a few other books, but I haven't picked up any of her other ones. I'm not entirely sure why, but Chaos Theory is about a main character who is a certified genius with a bipolar disorder and a politician's son who is running from his own addiction and grief, and that's two separate characters, but it is a romance story between the two of them. The Neighbour Favour by Christina Forrest is definitely one of my most anticipated releases for the year. This one is coming out on February 28th, and it is by the author of Zyla and Kai, which was one of my favorite books that I read this year, and also a couple of other books that I've read in the past that I've really liked. So this is actually the first adult romance by this author. She has written All YA books that I have read. So an adult romance, like so far, that has gone really well for me. A lot of authors, who used to write YA, they're kind of making their way to adult romance specifically, and it's been very successful so far. But this is about a shy bookworm who enlists the help of a neighbor, but then ends up finding out, like she doesn't know, but I'm assuming she finds out eventually, that this neighbor who is helping her is actually the reclusive anonymous author that she has been writing to. I think this sounds so good. Delicious Monsters by LaSalle Sambury is another book that I actually already own. The publisher was kind enough to send me a copy, so thank you so much to them. But this is coming out on February 28th, and it's by the author of Blood Like Magic, which I really am needing to read soon, and definitely before I get to this one, I'm gonna have to read it. But this one is going to be very different than Blood Like Magic, which was a fantasy. This is The Haunting of Hill House meets Sadie in this evocative and mind-bending psychological thriller. It follows two girls who are in this like haunted mansion, but 10 years apart. I love stories that feature dual timelines, and especially with like a mystery sort of thriller story. I think that sounds very cool. The Jump by Brittany Morris is coming out on March 7th. This is the author of The Cost of Knowing and Slay, which both books I really liked. And this is kind of another, she likes to write like kind of a twist on the typical contemporary novel, and I am a huge fan of that. So in this one, we have a very high stakes and dangerous scavenger hunt throughout Seattle. And the prize for it could help these characters who are very much in need of it, but it could help them save their families as well as their communities. It seems really cool. Defiant by Brandon Sanderson is also supposedly coming out on March 16th. So this is the final, I think, A Book to the Skyward quartet. It will be the fourth book, and I'm assuming that it's going to be the last one. I'm not entirely sure like what I'm going to feel about this one, just because I had really kind of mixed feelings about Cytonic, which is the latest book, but I enjoyed the first two books a lot, so I'm hoping we will get back to me really liking it. Next, coming out on March 16th as well, we have Greymist Fair by Francesca Zappia. This is by the author of Eliza and Her Monsters, which came out a few years ago and everyone was talking about. It was very, very hyped up, but I don't think that this author has come out with a book since then. However, this one is actually a murder mystery that is supposedly going to keep readers turning the pages. Eliza and Her Monsters was very much not that, but it's said to be a story that is about childhood fears growing into adult responsibilities. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I also am quite intrigued by that. I definitely am wanting to read more by this author, and I'm very excited that they have a new book out, so we'll see how I feel about it. Next, on April 4th, Spellbound by F.T. Lukens is coming out. This is the latest by the author of In Deeper Waters or Deepest Waters, something like that, and then they have another book that I still need to read, so this is Ever After, but they write really fun fantasy books, and Spellbound is going to be more of kind of like a magical one. Like by that I mean like spells and stuff. It's about two rival apprentice sorcerers who must team up to save their teachers and protect their own magic. That sounds fun. Next, also on April 4th, Blood Debts by Terry J. Benton Walker is coming out. This is another debut that has me super interested. It's contemporary fantasy that is about powerful magical families, intergenerational curses, and deadly drama in New Orleans. That sounds right up my alley. The latest book by Marie Lu, who is the author of many books, Blood and Smoke, is coming out on April 4th as well. This one has a very interesting comp, so it's supposed to be The Hating Game meets Mission Impossible. So what I'm getting from that is that we are going to have enemies to lovers and then Mission Impossible. It's a story about a superstar who is becoming a secret agent and the reluctant young spy who is assigned to be his partner. I really don't know, but like spies, you know, the secret agent sort of thing. I haven't read very many spy novels, if even any. However, this one with the like superstar aspect, very interesting. Romantic Comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld is coming out on April 11th. This kind of reminds me, I included it in yesterday's video actually, the like if you liked this then you might like this 2023 release. It reminds me a little bit of Nora Goes Off Script, which I read last year. But in this case we have a comedy writer who thinks that she has sworn off love until a dreamy pop star flips the script on all her assumptions. Ooh. Woo! Throwback by Marine Gu is coming out on April 11th as well, and it is Back to the Future meets Joy Luck Club. It sounds like it could be really cute because it is about a Korean American girl who is sent back to the 90s to reluctantly help her mother win homecoming queen. Of course, we have Happy Place by Emily Henry. This book needs no introduction, but this is coming out on April 25th, and it is your most anticipated release of the year, but it also is probably mine. I'm really excited for this one. So just to briefly talk about it, because I did talk about it in that other video, it is about a couple who broke up months ago but makes a pact to pretend to still be together for their annual week-long vacation with friends. Warrior Girl Unearthed by Angeline Boodley is the latest by the author of Firekeeper's Daughter, which I read this past year and was a huge fan of. This one is coming out on May 2nd, and it is about a native teen who must find a way to bring an ancestor home to her tribe. I'm gonna try and go through the rest of these like pretty quickly because I've been filming for a very long time, so I'm gonna try and what's it called? Being so expository? You know what I'm trying to say. I hope, at least. Imogen, obviously, is the latest book by Becky Albertalli, the author of Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda, and this one is also coming out on May 2nd. I will say, the synopsis for this one is kind of confusing. It's basically a main character who is like super straight, but she's trying to like help out a friend who is newly out, and it's a fake dating sort of thing. Not really sure, but I do really enjoy Becky Albertalli. Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune is another one I'm super looking forward to. This is the latest by the author of Every Summer After, and is coming out on May 2nd as well. It is following a random connection that sends two strangers on a day-long adventure where they make a promise, one keeps and the other breaks, and it has life-changing effects. That seems like a very high-stakes situation. Jana Goes Wild by Farah Heron is coming out on May 2nd as well, and it is about a woman who is trying to shed her perfect image at a destination wedding. Ooh, I love wedding stories. I said that very commercially, but that was the way that I was reading. But I love wedding stories, and the cover for this one looks super cute. Only This Beautiful Moment by Abdi Nazemian is coming out on May 9th, and this one is following 3 generations of boys in the same Iranian family. So we have 2019, 1978, and 1939. I love these generational stories, so this one seems like an automatic success for me. The Comeback Summer by Ali Brady is coming out on May 9th. I read The Beach Trap by this author this past year, and I really liked it. And this one is kind of similar, so it is about 2 sisters who have one summer to crush their comfort zones and save their grandmother's legacy. These are kind of like romance stories. It's more adult contemporary because there is a romance, but I found that the sister and family relationship was more of the focus, and it seems like that is exactly what I'm going to get with this next one. The Celebrants by Stephen Rowley is like, oh my god, I'm so pumped for this one. So it's coming out on May 16th, and it is about a group of college friends who made a pact to like throw each other living funerals. So it's this decades old pact that they are getting back to, and I love that. It's definitely, I feel like it's gonna be sad, but also really good. The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren is the latest by this author duo that I love, but also some of their books I end up really loving, but then others I haven't been a huge fan of, like Something Wilder I didn't really like all that much, but I'm very hopeful. So this is coming out on May 16th, and it is following a romance novelist and a documentary filmmaker who join forces to craft the perfect love story. Now that seems like a great idea. Same Time Next Summer by Annabelle Monaghan is coming out on June 6th, and this is the latest by the author of Nora Goes Off Script, which I was talking about earlier, but this kind of reminds me a little bit of Every Summer After. It is about a newly engaged woman who goes to her family's cabin that she used to go to all the time with her fiance actually, but there she runs into the guy who broke her heart like 14 years ago. It was her first love, and now she has to face him, and you know, you can kind of see where I'm getting Every Summer After, or even Love in Other Words vibes. Always Isn't Forever by J.C. Cervantes is coming out on June 6th, and this is by the author of Flirting with Fate, which I haven't read, but I was kind of seeing everywhere for a while this past year. But this one seems like it's going to be like You've Reached Sam, and it seems like it's going to be really sad. It is a character whose best friend and love dies in a boating accident, but then his soul ends up being transferred into the local bad boy. So so she has a chance to say goodbye, which is obviously going to be really sad. Business or Pleasure by Rachel Lynn Solomon is coming out on June 20th. This one is about a ghostwriter and a struggling actor, and they end up helping each other on the page and in the bedroom. Dun dun dun! You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight by Kaylin Barron is coming out on June 20th. This is by the author of Cinderella is Dead, and then she also had another book, but I didn't really end up liking that one that much. But this is set at Camp Muir Lake, and it's kind of like a Can You Survive the Night story, so seeming more like a sort of horror thriller plotline. The 7 Year Slip by Ashley Poston is another adult romance by this author. She started with YA but now has made her way here. She wrote The Dead Romantics, really loved it. This one's coming out on June 27th, and it follows an overworked book publicist's perfectly planned future, which ends up hitting a snag when she falls in love with a temporary roommate, but discovers that he's living 7 years in the past. So kind of reminding me of One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston, which I also really loved. Will They or Won't They by Ava Wilder is by the author of How to Fake It in Hollywood, which I read this year and I liked a lot. This is coming out on June 27th, and these co-stars of a beloved drama, they have this like complex history, but they end up teaming up again to film the final season of this like paranormal drama that they have been starring in. So definitely making me think of, oh my god, it was just in my head, The Roughest Draft by Emily Woodberly and Austin Sigmund Broca. I haven't read that one yet, but it is kind of similar, but with writers. House of Roots and Rune by Erin A. Craig is coming out on July 25th, and this is actually the second book for House of Salt and Sorrow, which came out quite a few years ago, so I'm kind of surprised that we're getting a sequel at this point, but I did really enjoy that book. I am excited for this one, but I think I'll kind of wait to see how people are feeling about it first, just because I'm not the hugest fan of sequels, especially since it has been so long. So this series is like a gothic thriller fantasy. It is perfect for around fall. The Sweetest Revenge by Lizzie Dent is coming out on July 25th, and this is Bridesmaids meets Emily in Paris. I haven't seen, I think I watched like one episode of Emily in Paris, but I do see kind of the connection there. So this woman ended up escaping her job in London after a moment of revenge on her ex ended up going viral. Now she has this life-changing summer to discover herself again and discover love as well. Immortal Longings by Chloe Gong is coming out on July 25th, and I am so excited for this one. This is now an adult fantasy by the author of These Violent Delights and Foul Lady Fortune. So she has written YA fantasies and now is moving into the adult sphere. But this one is also a Shakespeare retelling, as the other ones have been. This time it is inspired by Antony and Cleopatra. Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo is coming out on August 1st, and I am so pumped for this one. This is the latest by the author of many books, but a fantastic YA author now moving into adult once again. This story is following a Dominican American family, but it is told through the voices of its women awaiting a gathering that will change their lives. And the final book that I want to talk about is also coming out on August 1st, and that is I'll Tell You No Lies by Amanda Macrina. This one, I actually have other books. I have Traitor by this author, but I haven't read it yet. But this one is set in the Cold War era, which there's not really any YA books that I have read before that are set during that era. And it's following a girl in America who becomes entangled in a Soviet, like an escaped Soviet pilot. So definitely a really interesting situation. Okay, so those are all of the books that I am really looking forward to that are coming out in 2023. Obviously, like, this isn't a full comprehensive list, but these are the ones that were really sticking out to me and I wanted to mention today. So thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and tomorrow, like I said, for Bookmas Day 30, I'm going to be talking about the 5-star predictions that I have for 2023. So I will see you in that video then. Bye!